Hi, everyone. Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the author journey today. Very excited. We're shaking things up a little bit. We have a guest with us today who I've been talking about the last little bit. Hopefully, there are lots of folks watching. If you are watching and you have questions, don't forget to pop them in the comments. And we'll be bringing up our guest, Tim Brookes, just in a very short minute. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He's currently the president of the Endangered Alphabets Project. He's written 16 books specializing in a combination of personal experience and accurate research. He was the director of the writing program at Champlain College for 10 years and lecturer at the University of Vermont for 30 years. In addition, he's been a commentator and essayist for National Public Radio and has also been published in the New York Times Magazine, the Atlantic Monthly, Harper's, National Geographic, and dozens of other publications. All of these experiences and interests led him to the creation of the Endangered Alphabets Project, an attempt to address the issue of global cultural endangerment by carving artwork and creating educational materials in nearly extinct writing systems. 10 years into the project, the endangered alphabets have been displayed and discussed across the world, and now are embodied in the Atlas of Endangered Alphabets at endangeredalphabets.com. And I'll bring that website up shortly. But for now, I'm going to bring Tim up to join me today at the author journey. Hi, Tim.
Hi there. Thanks for
Thank
inviting
you.
me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I guess you're in Vermont right now, I think.
Actually, I'm just across Lake Champlain from Vermont. I'm looking out the window and I can see Vermont.
Nice.
I say that I still live in Vermont. It's just that I have a long driveway that's prone to flooding.
You're right. Well, I think you're
So I take
probably
the ferry across. Yeah.
experienced similar weather. We're getting a nice snowstorm today, so hopefully both of our internets stay with us as we chat. So very exciting. This Endangered Alphabet Project, as you said, it's been going for 10 years, but it seems to still need some, a little momentum. You've got your momentum going, but talk a little bit about with your background, of course, as a journalist and as an essayist and an author and a storyteller. What was it that led you to the aha, I need to look further into this?
Yes, it's a really interesting question where anything begins. I mean, you can trace things back to all kinds of origins, and I'm going to suggest two of them. So when I was in my fourth year of high school in England, so this would have been 1969. There was a kid who sat near me, and he was a kind of a tough little nugget and didn't talk to anybody. He spent his whole time doodling. And what he was doodling was band names. So he was doing that kind of sort of experimental calligraphy that everybody was doing, everybody who was hip was doing in 1969. The kind of stuff that was turning up on LP covers, album covers. And he would take the letters and do all kinds of interesting, colorful, psychedelic things with them. And I started copying him, which he hated. I was just a nerd as far as he was concerned. But I thought it was really interesting. And that was really the first and only time that I did any kind of art that was worth looking at. And it's very interesting that it's an art that really is an extension of writing, because my aim was to be a writer. So we then jumped forward about 40 years. And at that point, we're now actually about 12 or 13 years ago. And I decided I had no money, and Christmas was coming up. And I decided I would make a sign, like a shingle, for my then wife for her therapy practice. And my mother installed in all of us this attitude that you can do anything as long as you get a book out of the library, or watch YouTube these days.
And now so we have Google, right?
And so I got some really nice curly maple, And I sort of figured out how to sketch the letters onto the wood, and I bought myself a little set of carving tools, and so I started carving them. And while I was doing this, my older daughter, who was a senior at the Rhode Island School of Design and had her senior show coming up, said, "Oh, make me a sign that I can hang above my table so that people will come and buy my stuff and I will stand out from the rest," because she has a very great business mind. And then my younger daughter, who was in high school and had no reason for a sign whatsoever, said she wanted a sign. So that became the Christmas when I carved signs for everybody I knew. That was Christmas presents that year. And that was a lot of fun. I'd never done wood carving before. And I gave them to people and they seemed to like them. And I had made a lot of mistakes in the process, but it was sort of coming together. And then I started carving Chinese characters. I asked people to choose a Chinese character that they thought somehow represented them, because I loved the fact that this was also writing, but it was also more graphic and more the movement of the hand is visible in the movement of the brush, and the carving tool really likes that. So I basically carved little pieces of wood with Chinese characters on until I ran out of wood and people to carve Chinese characters for. And at that point, I thought, okay, I need another language. And as you know, I had been in southern India for National Geographic, and I had seen the Malayalam script down in Kerala in southern India. And I thought that was to me, obviously to them it's normal. To me, it was very strange and exotic. And I thought maybe I'll try carving something in that. And
that was when you were researching the 30 degrees of, or 30% chance of enlightenment, right?
Yes, that was the book. That was the trick that became 30% chance of enlightenment. Yes. Yes, it was originally a weather forecasting assignment for National Geographic, and everything went wrong, which of course makes for great writing, you know.
I think that book was phenomenal, was fabulous, and it was funny and it was sad, and yeah, I think, yeah. So back to, you're in India, you're seeing this beautiful writing.
Yes. So here I am now, I'm back in Vermont, and I'm thinking, okay, I just literally Googled Malayalam. And I came across this website called omniglot.com, which had all of these different writing systems from around the world. And as I'm going through these, I'm thinking several things. One, I'm a fairly well-traveled person, but I've never heard of most of these. Two, they're sort of, it's extraordinary how much variety there is in writing. There's stuff that, you know, you would swear was not writing at all, was mathematics, or was, you know, kind of something from a different planet.
Hieroglyphics, right?
All sorts of things, or even more strange than the hieroglyphics. I've got a couple of pieces here I can show you if you're interested.
Oh, please, yes. And I want to also just welcome everybody that's watching and say hello to Joanna, who's actually coming to us from Dubai. So, you know, Cyrillic alphabets are pretty fascinating as well, right? So what have you got there?
Oh, so this.
Oh, look. Oh my gosh.
Extraordinarily beautiful.
Oh my gosh, that is stunning.
So that's a form of writing that was used in South Asia up until about 400 years ago, at which point it began to morph into other forms of writing. So I'm struck by all of these. And also, as I'm reading about each of these, it keeps saying no longer used for official purposes, no longer taught in schools, only used by priests, only used by women to write secret love letters. And I'm thinking, this is just extraordinary. Yeah.
I'm going to learn that.
Because when you have an alphabet that's when you have an alphabet that's sufficiently endangered, essentially it becomes a code. It becomes a way of communicating to people in that exquisite minority. So I decided I would carve some of these sort of as a way of preserving them. And that's how it all began. It was the most ambitious thing I had ever done in my life.
I'm going to share some of these as you're chatting. So here's some more examples,
yes.
right? Of course, I love the live one as well. And I just also want to point out to everybody who's watching, if they, as Tim is chatting, and the project, grabs your attention, definitely go to the website. And if you want to support the project, there's a way to contribute. So, okay, go ahead.
Yes,
Sorry, I just had to share that.
No, I'm really glad. Yes, we love people supporting the project. And in fact, that's actually an interesting point, because what I discovered early on, to my great surprise, was that I had the field entirely to myself. So as a writer, you're always looking for the subject that nobody else has written about. Mm-hmm. And I had just sort of stumbled right into it. But on the other hand, I couldn't help thinking that the world's endangered alphabets could not be in worst possible hands, because I have no training as a linguist or an anthropologist or anything like that. So as I was carving, I was just sort of stumbling around, researching as best I could. And at the time, there was nothing. And as a subject, it has sort of been ostracized out of the field of linguistics. And so,
well, see, that's what makes you the perfect person for that project, because with the curious mind of a journalist, the passion for storytelling, and the focus on the research and the years of travel. So I think it's a beautiful combination, making you the person
very much
for
so.
this.
I only wish that I were able to afford to travel for the alphabets as much as I did when I was a travel writer, because obviously the airlines are paying me and magazines are paying me. So right. Now I'm on my own nickel. And so people say to me, do you speak all these languages? Have you been to all of these places? And the answer is no. My girlfriend and I went to Morocco, which was wonderful, because there's an endangered alphabet there, the alphabet called Tifinagh of the Amazigh people. Wow. And so I got to see a lot of that, and I got to meet a lot of Amazigh people, which was great. Wow. If you'll just forgive me for a second, I need to plug my phone into my laptop so that we don't completely run out of juice here.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed as our internet stays on.
Oh, no. Yeah, no kidding. Yes, exactly.
Excellent.
So
Morocco.
Yes. Yeah, that was wonderful, because what we found was that in order to understand script endangerment, you have to understand the dynamics of people and cultures. So the Amazigh people have been in North Africa for more than 2,000 years, and they have writing that goes back that far. But starting with the Romans, and then the Arabs, and then the French, through all of the countries of North Africa where they have traditionally lived in a nomadic or semi-nomadic fashion, they've always been the ones who were not in charge. They've been minorities, or they've been the sort of the politically dispossessed. And
very difficult for them to record their languages.
Very difficult for them to do anything. And it's when you are told by the dominant culture that you are backward or primitive or inferior, then you have an unenviable choice. You can either try to become like the successful ones, which you never really do, because people always know that your skin color or your accent or whatever is different. And so you're just a poor relative, really. Or you try to stay with your traditions and your ancestry, in which case the chances of advancement are few to none. And this is what's happening in most of the countries in the world. I'm only focusing on the ones that actually have their own writing system, but obviously it's a dynamic that happens everywhere, including Canada, obviously.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And Joanna says we have so much to learn from those codes, which is very true. And I want to say a shout out. We've got some people from all over the world here. Tim, we have
Excellent.
James, who's actually in one of your old stomping grounds in Nunavut.
Ah,
Yeah. And James says language is important. Sadly, the Inuit language is fading as well. They're fighting to keep it alive, but it is a struggle. So
yeah.
it's
So I have to give a plug right now for this wonderful publishing company up in Nunavut called Inhabit Media. And
yay.
they,
That was one of my
yes,
questions.
yes,
Excellent.
yes, they are publishing books not only in Inuit language, but also using the syllabics.
Mm,
And they're books about, even though many of them are narrative storybooks, children's books, adult
mm.
books, some of them nonfiction, they're all very immersed in the traditional Inuit ways of life and ways of knowledge. And my hat is off to them every day.
Oh, that's wonderful. And actually, I have that in my questions to talk about your work with Inhabit Media. So I'm so glad that that came up. And I'm so happy James is with us. He'll be on our author journey as a guest in a short while as well. So I wanted to, it was interesting. I watched an interview that you did with Rick Pellieri, the Songwriter's Notebook.
Oh, yes.
How's that for digging into the past, right?
Yeah, good research.
And you said in that interview, when you talked about the difference between carving and writing, in the course of my life, I've probably published 1 million words and now spend an entire evening working on one. That
Yeah,
gave me goosebumps. That gave me
yeah.
goosebumps, right? Because I can picture, and I'd also seen one of your videos. You're refurbishing this beautiful barn on your property that's going to be your workshop. So I just had this vision in my head, of you in that barn, the rustic barn, bent over the workbench and carving away for one word. I mean, it's amazing what you're doing.
Um, I think, in all fairness, I need to separate that into two images. So
Okay,
I
good.
am spending the evening, but I'm bending over the kitchen counter carving one word because the barn is so badly in need of refurbishment that when
Oh,
it snows, the snow blows onto my miter saw and my
oh.
wood pile through the cracks in the barn.
I thought you were going to say you're bent over the kitchen counter icing the chocolate cake.
Oh, that too. Yeah.
So I mean that's quite an evolution. I mean, obviously it takes a fair bit of patience, to watch everything come together. So how did you make that shift from, sitting at a typewriter and banging out your story to meticulously carving one
Yeah.
word?
So I think it's almost certainly a time of life thing.
Hmm.
When you're younger and you're eager to do everything and impress everybody and say everything, that kind of high speed internet stuff that's happening in your head all the time, it makes sense. What I found when I started working on this first exhibition very, very quickly was that being forced to slow down, because if you try and do it hastily, you either make mistakes or you stick the carving tool through your hand, which is that'll teach you right away.
Ooh,
Um, um, it becomes, first of all, it's a full body process. So if you're carving a curve, you actually lean through it. So
mhm,
it's very involving. Secondly, it demands so much of your attention that everything else gets shut out.
mm,
You can't afford distractions. And in the evening, especially, it's just a wonderful way to end the day, because
mhm,
whatever has happened during the course of the day, now it's your world is sort of shrinking right down to this little pool of light.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and it's also when you're carving, you get inside the wood. And I just wrote a piece for my forthcoming book, Writing Beyond Writing, which
mhm.
is called 13 Ways of Looking at a Piece of Wood. And um, I'm comparing the act of writing say by hand or by typewriter, with the act of carving exactly the same piece of text. And when you're going into the wood, there is a very strong sense that you and the wood are collaborating with this. And it's a process that has depth in many meanings. And once you've done that, then writing on a tablet or writing on a surface or whatever, it feels hasty. It feels superficial.
Interesting. And Joanna says it's very connective work. So it truly is. And James also added, Inhabit has some amazing books. I'm trying to get my children's picture books translated through them. So there's lots of symbiosis going on here.
Yeah.
Excellent. So talk a little bit about, I actually also had forgotten. So years ago, for everybody to understand, I don't even want to say 2010, when I came across your book, 30% Chance of Enlightenment, and had done a review. And then you had subsequently, bless you, done a blurb for the back cover of my last novel, Deep Deceit. I'm working on the next one, so stay tuned.
Excellent.
But I also I'm gonna embarrass you here. I had to pick up a copy of this.
Yes.
At the time when I did the review, I had mentioned it at the end of the review, but I wasn't a guitar player at the time. So since then, and just in the last few years, but I would think, and you talk about a little bit about that whole connection, with your guitar and with the wood, and it's just the making of a guitar. You had researched that before, so you probably had some of that, coming to the forefront when you started doing this carving. I mean, is there any sort of connection?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And in fact, when I was very young, I remember going to a wood yard with my father and being fascinated by the smells and also by the sound. When you have these 10, 12-foot planks or boards being sort of stacked up against the wall, there's a very particular kind of woody rattle that happens. And when I started writing about Rick Davis making me that guitar, it very much took me back to that. And because he's such a wonderful craftsman, and because these woods are just such extraordinary woods, there's no doubt that my interest in wood that led to the Endangered Alphabets was definitely kindled or rekindled by working on the guitar book. I'll tell you one other interesting thing that I don't really know what to make of, but it's also kind of deep. So before I started working on the Endangered Alphabets, if I wanted to sort of slow myself down in the evening and just kind of do that somewhat introspective sort of self-collecting or centering or whatever, I would play the guitar.
I do that a lot.
Yes, exactly. Once I started carving, somehow that occupied the exact same spot in my psyche. And I discovered that I had stopped playing guitar in the evenings. And nowadays, if there's a piece of wood, I just want to have my hand on a piece of wood. And I think part of it is that at the end of the day, if you're working with your hands and you've made something that you can see and that you're satisfied with, it's an extraordinarily sort of satisfying and calming and sort of self-reinforcing thing. Exactly. And it reminded me when I was doing my hitchhiking book and I was traveling around the country.
A hell of a place to leave a cow.
Hell of a place to lose a cow. Yes.
Lose a cow. That's on my reading list now, Tim. Sorry.
The most anxious person I met on the entire trip who picked me up was an artist, and the least anxious person, the calmest person, was a stonemason. And he was actually refurbishing the cathedral in Toledo, Ohio. And as soon as he told me that, I said, "Show me your hands." And he showed me his
Oh.
hands, and like he had scabs on every single knuckle, you
Wow.
know. But
My
at the end of
grandfather
the
was a stonemason and did some
ah
work in New England.
ah,
Mm.
but at the end of the day, he can look down that line of stone, and
Right.
as they say of God, he saw that it was good.
Oh,
Whereas if
yes.
you're working with your mind,
Mm.
then there's never an end. You can
Mm.
always cause more problems for yourself. Um,
So true.
and that's one of the things that I'm really grateful that the Endangered Alphabets has brought to me, sort of on a selfish level.
I just think that is really an awesome comparison, right? And just to also remind people, endangeredalphabets.com is where you can go to learn more about this amazing project and about Tim. And I just, before we'll have to wrap up shortly, but do you think you'll get back to the writing, or is this what you're going to do now, or are you going to ever just kind of chill out?
Easily bored. I don't chill very well. So I mean, yes, I've just sent the manuscript of my next book,
Excellent.
Writing Beyond Writing, to my editor. So I'm absolutely still writing all the time. And one of the
Good.
things that happened in that book, which is what I really look forward to when I'm writing something that has some heft to it, is I was writing about things to which I did not know the answer and to which I hadn't read any answers by anybody else. And for a nonfiction writer, to me, the greatest satisfaction and challenge is getting to that point where you are absolutely at the limits of your own comprehension. And what you're writing is, it's not just about researching fact, it's about researching understanding, trying to come to a point where you have asked a question that maybe nobody else has ever asked. And that's a wonderful position to be in, because it really brings out the best of whatever it is you have to offer. And to be challenged. The other thing is that the Alphabets challenges me all the time on many, many different fronts. And one of them is really on the writing front. And much of this book is actually trying to understand the relationship between the writer and the act of writing.
Oh, wow. And so what
Dun, dun,
do
dun.
you, that's dun, 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 dun. And well, I mean, there's so many, like the interaction between that is going to be different for every writer, right? You know, between the writer and the writing, because we all have different habits and different favorite places to write, and different genres and that kind of thing. Which it's lots of
That's
food for
very
thought.
true. But I was actually incoming call. I was asking myself a slightly different question, which is, for example, what do you have to do with your thoughts in order to have them ready for writing? What does the act of being able to see your own thoughts do to not only your writing, but your thinking? What happens when you take something which had previously been private and you make it public? One of the really interesting things about writing is that it takes something which is invisible and intangible, namely an idea, a thought, and it makes it visible and tangible. And that process affects other people, and it, in fact, can affect them in ways that are invisible and intangible, because it affects their thinking. But the fact that you've put it out there also then affects you. And interestingly enough, this is an echo, I believe, of the fact that some of the origins of writing, especially in Asia, were in magic. And so the act of making a symbol is an act of directed intent. It's taking a thought and trying to visualize it in such a way that it becomes an active agent in the physical universe. Wow, that's a great
Wow.
phrase. I
That's
need to
very
go back and watch this to
philosophical.
write that one down again.
Well, and exactly the purpose of the Endangered Alphabets Project, right,
Yeah.
is to show people physical examples that can be, that you can touch and feel, to increase the awareness of the potential for extinction.
Yes. And what is also really interesting about this is that when I give a talk or an exhibition or whatever, I almost always have some carvings that people can hold or touch or pass around. And that changes everything. The fact that it's in 3 dimensions, the fact that it has heft, the fact that it has smell, the fact that they can then, everybody traces the letters with their finger. And you realize that writing is an extension of the human body. Printing isn't, but writing is. And that relationship between ourselves as physical beings and this product is extraordinarily deep.
That's incredible. And we're going to wrap up now, but you also have the opportunity, people can purchase some of your carvings, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Yep. And also on the website, they can find those, right?
Yes. And then you've also got the timbrookesinc.com site where people can go and have a look at some of the books that I've written, many of which are still available. Yes, so you said at the beginning, the Alphabets is in this state of constant expansion, and we're doing more and more ambitious things. Because we're ahead of the curve, there is no funding for the kind of thing we do. There aren't any foundations or agencies, so we rely almost exclusively on individual donations and Kickstarter campaigns.
Okay, I'm going to show everybody again. Right on the homepage of endangeredalphabets.com, there's a button to click on to contribute. Easy as pie. Make a donation. Let them know that you saw Tim here on the author journey. And follow him on all of his social media, on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter. And just to also share, I have this one as well, but this one I dug out from the back of my bookcase. It was The Ghost of Good Intentions, which is a collection of Tim's NPR essays and stories. So that's a really good one. So yeah, have a look at his website, timbrookesinc.com.
One of my favorite titles as well.
I love that one, Ghosts of Good Intentions. That's one of my favorites. And of course, I've just started reading Guitar and American Life. So stay tuned and I'll post a review for that. So Tim, I so appreciate you joining us today. You'll have to come back and give us an update on the Endangered Alphabets Project.
I would love to. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I want to thank everybody for joining us on the author journey today, and hope you can come back and see us next week, where we'll have more exciting guests to fill your heads with lots of stories. So we'll talk to you soon on the author journey. For now, I'll say goodbye. Have a wonderful evening.